Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. If you're here for the business forum Q&A, I'd love you to take your seats. That would be great. Thank you very much. Appreciate you heading to a seat. And while you're doing that, I just want to say a big welcome. My name is Tanya WIlks from KOFM Breakfast, and I've been asked to, I guess in a very loose way, moderate tonight's Q&A for the business community and for the seat of Newcastle. Now, of course, there are two huge issues that everyone keeps talking about, and that's the rail line, of course, and the revitalisation plan for the city. That's the other one. But tonight, big words when you get up at 3:15 every day. This is my bedtime, so just give me a prod if I fall asleep. But they are the two big issues, as we well know. We're all talking about those. However, tonight we're here for you, the business community, and that is what we want to focus on, your questions and answers as to where your candidates see business in the seat of Newcastle. Please make welcome three of the candidates for the seat of Newcastle. For the Greens, Mr. Michael Osborne. Your sitting Labor member, Mr. Tim Crakanthorp. And Liberal candidate, Ms. Karen Howard, sorry. So, and that's what we want. We want a really respectful evening because these, you know, I've always thought, regardless, 20 years in doing breakfast radio in this town, I admire anybody who puts their hand up to stand up for our city and work hard for our city. So if we can just do it in a really respectful way, I think we're going to have a pleasant hour ahead of us. So thank you. Firstly, I'd also like to welcome the representative for the Hunter, who is with the New South Wales Business Chamber, and it's Duncan Burke. It's a strange spelling. So please welcome Duncan. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Firstly, I'd just like to congratulate the Throsby Basin Business Chamber, the Hamilton, Mayfield and New Lambton Business Chambers for staging this event this evening. As business chambers, it's very important that we're working together ensuring that the voice of business, and in particular the voice of small business, which is the economic backbone of our country and our state and our communities, is heard, and that the people that are going to be making the decisions for us in and around how we operate are listening to what the businesses have to say. New South Wales Business Chamber is Australia's oldest business association and represents more than 17,000 businesses across the state and is linked to more than 180 local chambers of commerce right across New South Wales. In March 2014, the New South Wales Business Chamber launched its policy priorities for the next government of New South Wales. The 5 priorities, which were selected and refined through a very close consultation process with local chamber representatives and other representatives of business across the state, were made, and it was a very interesting process. The 5 priorities are based on the challenges identified by the chamber prior to the previous New South Wales election in 2011, but unfortunately have remained unmet. Unfinished business, there's a folder out the front there, highlights the 5 challenges that the chamber prior believed were not met, but are needed to be made in order for growth and prosperity for the state, and particularly for the businesses. So the number 1 issue was fund and deliver more infrastructure across New South Wales through public asset swaps, the likes of poles and wires. Revitalise and reform local government, deliver senior schooling and more effectively to improve outcomes for young people in the school system, improve New South Wales energy security and address the pricing challenges, put New South Wales on the front foot by creating a more competitive tax system. Over the last 12 months, the Chamber has taken this campaign on the road, organising and facilitating 15 unfinished business events across the state to discuss business concerns and how these 5 priorities will help address them. More than 3,000 businesses have attended these events and have actually had their voices heard. With over a month remaining until this crucial election, this evening presents an opportunity to speak to our local candidates about their commitment to the agenda we've put forward, but also the local issues for businesses in your area. So what are the issues for you in business? As the business community of Newcastle, I encourage you to make the most of the opportunity and let the candidates know what's important to you, the engine room of not only the New South Wales economy, but this community also. So thank you and good luck to the candidates. We look forward to a vigorous debate.
Thank you, Duncan. Now, the format for the evening, we're going to start by giving each of the candidates 5 minutes to stand up and tell you their vision and to address what they see as important for the seat of Newcastle when it comes to business. They will be on a clock, and I'll give you about a 30-second signal to say that you kind of got to wrap up in 30, if that's okay. So it's pretty relaxed, but we do want to make sure everyone gets equal time. After that, the candidates were issued only today, so they haven't had a lot of time to prepare, but there are questions that have been submitted via the chamber to the candidates. I'll just pose those questions and they can all have 2 to 3 minutes to answer those questions. And then at the end, we will take questions from the floor. Nathan, you will be selecting those questions and moving the microphone amongst the crowd. So is that all right with everybody? We ready? Okay. Now we decided it was a first in, first dressed as far as who got up to speak first. Michael Osborne was here first. So please welcome your Greens candidate, Michael Osborne, with his 5 minutes.
Does this work? Oh, it does. Thanks for inviting me here today. I'd like to acknowledge that we're here this afternoon on the traditional country of the Awabakal and Worimi people. Recognise their more than 200 years of dispossession and ongoing connection with the land. And I think it's important that we do recognise that, and that statement is something that has been developed with the Awabakal and Worimi people in Newcastle by Newcastle people, and it's something that Newcastle Council reads out at the beginning of each meeting. And I think it's an example of what we can do in Newcastle if we all sit down and work together. By way of introduction, I'm a planning engineer. I have a number of roles in the world. I teach out at the university. I work at a council in a planning engineering role. I'm on Newcastle City Council and have been for 11 years. But over and above all of that, I'm passionate about Newcastle. You probably know that the Greens have, one of their principles is about diversity. And often you think of diversity and the Greens as being biodiversity in the forests or multiculturalism in our communities. But it also goes equally well for business, and particularly small business, which, as has been said already, stealing my line, is the backbone of the economy. Australian Treasury have done the statistics across the country, and almost 50% of private sector employment is in small business. About a third of private sector value adding in the economy is coming from small business. So for anyone to not understand that small business is the backbone of the economy, the statistics tell a different story. Small business makes a significant contribution to our economy, and therefore we need to be encouraging small business, encouraging diversity in small business. In a recent meeting of the Reserve Bank of Australia board, Glenn Stevens said that a key thing that was hampering our economy is a lack of confidence. And what the actual minutes of the board meeting said was that non-mining investment was a necessary element for growth in the economy, and the importance of confidence in underpinning that outcome. And we needed an improvement in the appetite for business to take on risk, which had the potential, should it occur, to lead to a much stronger growth in our economy. So the important thing, the take-home message, is we need a strengthening of non-mining investment and an improvement in confidence. And in my mind, that is a key role for our government, for our representatives at local, state and federal level. And I think it particularly applies, given the recent history in Newcastle with the ICAC, the resignations, the brown paper bags. It's particularly important that we restore our confidence in our elected representatives that therefore flows to strengthening our economy.
Can I just make a quick point? It was actually envelopes, not
Brown paper envelopes, not brown paper bags. Thank you. The three key issues in my mind of providing that leadership from government is integrity of our politicians, a vision developed with the community, and proper strategic planning to facilitate that non-mining investment that Glenn Stevens talks about. So let me say this clearly. Newcastle has been let down by our elected representatives. Newcastle has been shortchanged by the corrupting influence of developer donations, and nothing that Labor or Liberal have said talks about changing that. Our representatives seem more comfortable advocating for the interests of foreign multinationals than standing up for small business, which is the backbone of our economy. Corporate donations have seen vested interests gazump the public interest and seen sensible planning gazump by brown paper bag or brown paper envelope planning. We need a reform in donation laws across the state and across the nation. If you've got the money to buy your way to see Labor or Liberal MPs, as it currently stands, then your projects see their way to approval, whether it's 20 stories in the CBD or an old farm out the back of nowhere that somehow is given a residential zone. That creates a race to the bottom. It's not transparent, and not many people are winners in that process. I'd like to make this commitment here tonight. If I'm elected on March 28, I will lead a series of community workshops so that all of us develop a consensus of vision for what we want in Newcastle. An all-of-community consensus vision so that we can have an agreed statement of where we want to go. We need to stop fighting with each other. We need to get down and articulate those things that we want in Newcastle. We need to see good planning outcomes for the future economy that we want to capitalise on. We want to see creative, innovative, inclusive strategies for our city. We need to see strategies that build on strategies like Renew Newcastle. We need strategies that reinforce our strength to build a more vibrant, livable and sustainable city. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael Osborne. All right, second person here, I think, was sitting member for Labor, Mr. Tim Crakanthorp. Please welcome.
On? Well, great. Thanks very much. Thanks, Tracy. Thanks to Duncan, who did the initial introduction, and also thanks to Nathan and Deb sitting down here from the Hamilton Business Chamber, who put in an enormous amount of work to bring this to you here tonight. I also want to pay my respects to the Awabakal and Worimi people, to the elders of those people, past and present. Before Labor's priority, our priority is jobs. It's very simple, and given you here today are the provider of jobs, Labor wants to do everything we can do to support you, to provide employment and jobs for people. And given unemployment's doubled in Newcastle in the last 12 months, that's of great concern to me as the elected state member, and certainly to Labor. I've run my own small business as a communications consultant for a short period of time, and I know just how hard it is to make ends meet out there in the real business world. Small and medium business enterprises are rapidly growing in Australia. Owners are often sole operators, mums or dads, or family outfits attempting to fulfil their vision of having more control over their life and creating a better balance between work and home. We understand the pressures of modern working life on families, and we really do believe in a fair go for all. Now, I've been a councillor on Newcastle City Council for many years. This is my 7th year, and I've been a regular attendee at the Hamilton Business Chamber, and I've spoken to many people here tonight over that time. And Council's assistance for the combined business chambers has been focused on helping to bring that coordinated approach to economic development in all our commercial precincts. But look, we have a positive, comprehensive plan to support local businesses in this state and in Newcastle, and that plan was developed with a lot of consultation with small business operators across a very large about the challenges that you face, and how Small Business Commissioner that we proposed with some real teeth, not just the current commissioner that's been legislated by the Liberal government, but something with actual real teeth can help small business. As part of our election policy, we've promised to allow registered pharmacists to do flu vaccinations, and there's many pharmacists here in Beaumont Street. We've also going to protect local newsagents by helping them renegotiate the lottery licences. And we want to make available adequate training for small business operators in areas such as business management, compliance, accounting, banking, and the digital economy. And we want to make sure that state government agencies and their contractors pay small business in a timely way. We want to continue to monitor taxes and charges paid by small business to ensure that they are fair and affordable, and provide an effective legal foundation for the Office of Small Business Commissioner, so the holders of that office can actually act independently and with confidence to actually help small business meaningfully in the state. And it's also really important that small businesses are treated fairly by other businesses and by state and local government bodies. And in terms of red tape, we want to report annually on the red tape burden, on its causes and how it can be reduced. I know that's a really big issue for many people. And we also want to protect small businesses from unfair contracts, including the area of retail leasing and franchising. So, look, there are a lot of the things that we're promising and we know that we can do, but we think a robust economy is the best way to keep consumers spending in your shops in Hamilton, New Lambton, Mayfield and across the city. And we're proposing major infrastructure projects in Newcastle to keep the economy strong. We want to build a world-class convention centre just down the road here in Wickham. We want to duplicate Toole Street Bridge. We want to fix the Adams Town gates once and for all. We want to complete Stage 5 of the inner city bypass. They're all major projects, and they're not just here, right here in the CBD. They're all over Newcastle. We've already funded the law courts and the university campus to get that to move into town, and the movement of the law courts to where they are. We put 60 million into the Hunter Stadium and over the Asian Cup, which saw a massive amount of tourists, and particularly for Hamilton, a good boon in the local shops here. We're the party of vision, Labor, of infrastructure, giving everyone, especially small businesses, a go, and a good fair go. Thank you.
Please thank Mr. Tim Crakanthorp. All right, please welcome Ms. Karen Howard.
I feel very tall standing up here like this. Thanks, Tanya. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet and pay my respects to elders past and present. I'd like to sincerely thank the organisers for this afternoon's event. Bringing us together to talk about small business is very important to me, and it's wonderful for me to be back in the Chamber family here as well. For 14 and a half years, I was one of you. I established a small business on International Women's Day, the 8th of March 1999, with all the enthusiasm and at times blind passion that drives all small business entrepreneurs. I can easily recall the heady heights of when someone actually paid their bill on time and all the lows of when they didn't. Until recently, I had a photocopy of the first ever cheque I received from my first client. It meant that much to me that someone paid me for working for them. Small business is about much more than that, and we know it. We know that the buck stops with us. When someone doesn't show up to work one day, we know that we pay ourselves last, behind the landlord, behind the suppliers, and behind the staff, if in fact we pay ourselves at all. Having said that, I really miss small business. I miss the mentoring that I received as a woman business owner, and that I was fortunate enough to pass on to other business owners over the past 14 years, to both men and women. Well, now I want to put that small business knowledge and experience to work in another way for you. I'm the only candidate before you today that has the real small business experience to do that. Small business is the backbone of New South Wales, on that we agree. 680,000 small businesses in the state employing 42% of the state's workforce. And the Liberal Party are the party for small business. I have to say, in my experience, I don't think Labor ever really understood small business, and now they think that it's okay to charge us a new tax of $7,500 each to fund their infrastructure program, which I'm not seeing much in for Newcastle. Equally disturbing, the Greens wanting to close down all mining activities within the next 5 years. The impact on small business alone will be absolutely horrifying. Now, I'm all for diversity. I spoke about this at length at the UDIA the other week. The work that's been put into developing the Williamtown Aerospace Centre out near the airport is currently creating hundreds of jobs, diversifying our economy in a way that I don't think we've ever seen before, is certainly valuable. Under Labor, the New South Wales economic growth on all indicators was the slowest in the nation for a decade. Thanks to the Liberal government, we're now back at number 1, and we have to ensure we stay there. I firmly believe it is the government's role to create an environment that allows hardworking people like you to prosper, to provide jobs, to provide for your families, and to continue keeping our state at number 1. Since 2011, when the Liberal government came into power in New South Wales, they did establish the Independent Office of the Small Business Commissioner. It's a very important advocate for small business when dealing with government and large corporations, and it does have teeth. They set up 2 fantastic small business buses that travel New South Wales. I was thrilled to see one over in Carrington the other week, followed very quickly by one here in Hamilton, and to see advisors from our very own Hamilton Business Centre helping our small business owners was just fantastic. The introduction of the 1 on 2 off rule for new regulations has seen something like 205 legislative instruments repealed for the 37 introduced. And the Liberal government introduced directives, which means the New South Wales government agencies pay their bills to small business within 30 days. Now, that might not sound like anything terribly special, but under the previous government, those payment plans were blowing out to 120 days. I know there's a lot more to do, and I hope that you're going to share your ideas with me. Government alone can't solve the problems facing small business. We need you to help us, and we need you to tell us what we can do better to enable you to prosper. If elected, my overriding principle will be to run an electorate office like a business. People must know that they can come and see you, and you will help to solve their problems. The door must be open to constituents and business alike, and we must be the conduit to common sense problem solving. We have to work together on solutions, and I encourage you to be proactive in determining the solutions. Around all of the villages and the surrounding communities, there are amazing things happening every day of the week. Carnivale this past weekend was a raging success. We had so much positive feedback from people wanting to see the city go forward. It was worth standing in the hot sun for nearly 8 hours for. Just lastly, I love that the Chamber family keeps growing into our surrounding communities, and I really encourage you to keep being proactive and determining your points of difference. Bring forward your ideas to activate your communities. I want to help you to prosper. Thank you.
Please thank Karen Howard. Okay, the second part now of the evening are the pre-prepared questions that the Chamber submitted to the candidates. They'll each get 2 minutes to answer, and we might just mix up the order a bit as we go. So the first question they all received today was, the chambers that actively work in the New South Wales seat of Newcastle represent about 300 members with thousands of others who call it home. The vast majority of those businesses employ less than 10 employees. These businesses are being strangled by red tape at all levels of government. So how, we want to know from the candidates, do you propose that New South Wales Government should tackle this issue and ensure that people who are happy to put in on the line every day can work in an environment that rewards their efforts? Tim?
Yeah, thanks, Tracy.
I'll just jump in. Tanya.
Sorry,
yeah,
Tanya.
That's all right.
Thanks, Tanya.
That's okay.
Very good question. Look, Labor put up a bill in Parliament in 2012, a Small Business Commissioner and Small Bill Protection Bill. Now, the Liberal Party didn't support that, and they put up their own legislation for a commissioner, which is a commissioner that doesn't actually have any real teeth. Now, our bill, if we get back into Parliament, would slash red tape, and it would ensure that every single year there is a report to New South Wales Government on how red tape is slashed for small business. And we'd like to see laws that burden small business and taken away, procedural or administrative, and recommendations for relieving it. But look, this state government isn't the biggest supporter of small business. When they came in, they got rid of Small Business September, Micro Biz Week, they cut the Young Entrepreneurs Program, and they also cut the Women in Business Mentoring Program. So there's been a lot of budget cuts, and they've been very unfairly directed at small business. They also cut the Parramatta Business Centre, the regional trade investment centres throughout New South Wales, Broken Hill, Tweed, Coffs Harbour, Goulburn. So I don't think this government is the government for small business at all. I think Labor certainly goes a very long way to that, and the commissioner that we've proposed has low-cost mediation services and cutting of red tape. You know, when they put forward the Small Business Commissioner, they didn't even provide legislative basis for the roles and functions. So we want a commissioner that has real teeth and will do real things for small businesses such as your own. Yeah, so I think that's it.
Okay,
Tanya?
thank you, Tim. Karen?
Here. Hello. Yep. I've already touched on some of the track record, and I'll just reiterate it very quickly because I know we've got a lot of questions to get through. But we have introduced a one on two off rule for new regulations. That's really important. When you're talking about cutting red tape, I encourage people to come and tell me which bit of red tape is getting in your way of employing people and prospering, and we'll do something about it.
Thanks, Karen. Michael?
Tanya. I guess to be clear, there's been a little bit of loose with the truth comments already tonight. I've been running my small business since 2004. It's an environmental consultancy business. And the Greens have always been supportive of small business at state and federal level. And if you vote for me on March 28, you'll get someone who's passionate about Newcastle, not someone who's beholden to Sydney head office. And that's a really important thing in my view. So I'll take up the issues of Newcastle, and I'll take them up through my colleagues throughout New South Wales and in the federal parliament. It was the Greens that proposed a small business commissioner at the federal level. We've also proposed a 2% tax cut for small business at the federal level, as well as a accelerated asset write-down for small business, taking the threshold up to $10,000. Now, these proposals are not pie in the sky. In fact, the asset threshold proposal comes straight from the Henry Tax Review. Those sort of issues we should be implementing as a country. In fact, it should be above politics, but I know, you know, some parties get bogged down in those sort of, you know, political point scoring. If you vote for me, I'll support you.
Thank you, Michael. Now, Newcastle City Council's draft local planning strategy proposes changes that will have massive ramifications for property owners that have a blend of residential and commercial property within the Newcastle LGA. Business has been told that inconsistencies and changes associated with Newcastle City Council's draft local planning strategy have been caused by the New South Wales Government's overlay of rezoning issues. How would you work with Council to ensure that zoning is appropriate for local communities? Now, we might start with you, Michael, again, because you are on Council, so let's hear it.
Firstly, can I say the local planning strategy is still being developed. Consultation is occurring now, and I know some people here may have gone to the recent Ward 2 consultation. I went to the evening consultation, but I understand the morning consultation had lots of people at that presenting their views. The problem has been caused by state government overlaying planning controls over the top of Newcastle Council's planning controls. I won't say for a minute that I think Newcastle planning controls are the best and don't need improvement, but the state government coming in over the top and overlaying another level on top of the Newcastle Local Environment Plan is part of the problem. That's why I've proposed that we need our own Hunter Planning Authority, where planning decisions and the planning framework is created in the Hunter, in the Lower Hunter, by Lower Hunter people. In that way, we can do, you know, the planning that we need in our area for our own purposes and for our own economic future. And I think that's important.
Karen? Microphone?
Hello? Do you want to use this one?
We need Karen's mic on.
How's that? Yep. Excellent, thank you. I think for me overall, these guys are the experts on planning. They work on Newcastle City Council. They've been councillors for a long time through lots of different circumstances, both good and bad, for community and business. Again, my answer on this one is quite brief. I believe that the overall planning system is in a mess, and I'm not sure that there'd be too much disagreement to that. If elected, one of this government's highest priorities will be renewing that planning framework, and I think it's particularly important that people are actually engaged in the process. It's all too easy to sit back and leave it to council and then have a whinge, or leave it to government and then have a whinge down the track. I'm about fronting up, telling us what's wrong and giving us an opportunity to fix it.
Thanks, Karen. Also, another councillor, obviously, Tim.
Yeah, thanks, Tanya. Look, I have been on council. It's my 7th year. Certainly, I believe that we've got too many layers of planning in New South Wales, full stop, and particularly Newcastle. So the Upper House inquiry into good planning in Newcastle, they put out their report yesterday, and it said there is way too much overlay from the state government on planning in Newcastle. Now, there are 4 different layers. You've got urban growth, you've got HDC, you've got council, and you've also got the Joint Regional Planning Panel, and also the Planning Commission for the really big ones. So how you're supposed to get big projects done with input from, you know, your local community if they're assessed at such a very, very high level. So council's trying to do something really good about that, and that is, you know, get people along to those sessions that Michael was referring to. There's still another one on tomorrow night out at Wallsend Library from 6 till 7:30 if you're interested. But I believe that local planning should be that, local, and we really need to get people very involved from our community, as to what actually happens. And that's what council's trying to do with the new Lord Mayor, Nuatali Nelm. She's been pushing this because she realises all too well that the planning controls and the instruments and how they relate to people locally are way out of touch with you guys and the people on the street. So that's what she's doing, and as a Labor councillor, I'm right behind that. And I also support the recommendation coming out of yesterday's report that local council has a lot more say in all of the planning in Newcastle, so we don't get the terrible position that we're in now with regards to the rail line and Hunter Development Corporation.
Thank you, Tim. I did mention the rail line earlier. Said we probably wouldn't go there, but we will, because there was a question. Obviously, the diversification of the transport systems in the inner city of Newcastle has dominated public and media discussion, but the seat of Newcastle extends well beyond. How will you work with business to ensure that transport infrastructure and planning incorporates key centres such as the Throsby Basin, Mayfield, New Lambton and Hamilton centres? Karen?
Thank you. Well, is this working this time around? Yep. Excellent. The Hunter Regional Transport Plan was released last year. It was based around 2-year-old consultation, and it's one thing that we're never short of in this place, it's plans. Hell of a lot of plans. It's a pretty heavy read, 74 pages. If anybody's really enthusiastic to do it, go your hardest. Just on transport though, it hasn't all been about Newcastle, although I can see why some of our surrounding communities will be feeling slightly neglected. Only last week, the Premier announced $273 million in road funding for the Hunter, some of that going to some intersections in and around Mayfield. And let's not forget the $50 million matched by the federal government to fix up the mess that was left by Labor called the Toole Street Bridge. We've also committed money to widening 3.8 kilometres of Cormorant Road. That might not sound like a very fascinating exercise. But when you're looking at the potential for us to tap into our tourism sector, we have got to have better connections with the airport, and coming off a one-lane bridge onto a one lane of road just doesn't cut it. We've also funded the inner city bypass, which recently Labor have withdrawn their funding for, I understand, reallocated it. So look, in terms of transport, again, if there are localised issues, people need to really be bringing them forward and talking to us about them, and actually talking to all three of us. If we don't know what's happening in your communities, it's very difficult to go and advocate for you. Thanks.
Thanks, Karen. Michael?
Firstly, can I say that the division in Newcastle over transport issues, I think, has been created by both Liberal and Labor candidates and representatives. In 2003, the Lower Hunter Councils got together and developed a Lower Hunter transport strategy. It was non-partisan, it was by experts. They looked across all modes of transport, they looked into the future, what did people want, what were the opportunities, how would it support small business and the particular centres across the region. And that strategy still, I believe, is the strategy that we should be implementing. That strategy called for light rail, it called for a world-class interchange, it called for continuing the Sydney services all the way into the Newcastle CBD. And those things, and it also called for more level crossings in Newcastle. And it also called for a Lower Hunter Transport Authority, so that those sort of transport decisions could be made in the Lower Hunter. And I think all of those recommendations from that report are still valid. So that was before I got on council, but Newcastle Council has supported, as have all the other Lower Hunter councils. The important thing is that we do have diversity. The proposal that we have currently being rolled out, the mess in Beaumont Street and around the city, is not diversity. It's actually reducing diversity. There is no reason why we can't have the Sydney trains go all the way into Newcastle Station and have a light rail network, particularly from Newcastle Station to the university at Callaghan, so that the students can go between the two campuses. But we should also be planning for that light rail to go all the way up to the John Hunter. The current design that's been let for the design of that road link from Jesmond up past the John Hunter doesn't include designing in provision for a light rail, and it also doesn't include, I've been told, the connection to the John Hunter Hospital. So on both of those aspects, I think that's a fail.
Michael, thank you. Tim?
Thanks. Look, the question is, how will you work with businesses to ensure that transport infrastructure and planning incorporates key centres such as Throsby, Basin, Mayfield, Lambton and Hamilton? Well, the answer is very simple, and that is a Hunter Transport Authority. Michael talked about it. It's about us, you, local business communities and stakeholders making the decisions on our transport. Now, at the moment, that happens in Sydney. The whole train fiasco that is Newcastle being truncated at Hamilton when it's not supposed to be, spending millions and millions of dollars of taxpayers' money that will be redundant because it wasn't supposed to be done then, and spending an extra $100 million on running down a dogleg rail line that isn't going to do the job, is not actually a transport decision, we've been told. We've been told it's a planning decision. So the biggest single infrastructure spend in this decade in Newcastle CBD, and it's about getting rid of a train, is not a transport decision, we've been told. So if you can figure that one out, you're doing a lot better than me. But it is a Hunter Transport Authority. That is the answer to the question.
Thank you, Tim. I might go a little off script for this this next question, because I think I speak for all of us when I say over the last few years, we've had some really testing times as a community, putting our faith and our trust in our political leaders. And I'm going back to the question, but I think we all agree that it's tough. When you put that person up there to represent us, you want to be sure and certain that they are trustworthy, and we want to know, as a community, how are you, as our candidates, going to restore the confidence that we will show you when we put you up to lead us. And we might start with you, Michael.
As I said before, I think the most important aspect of being a community representative is to have integrity. And what that means for me, for example, is if I find a confidential cabinet document down the back of a filing cabinet, I don't give it to my Sydney party leader who sits on it for months. I find out what it's about and release it to the public. I also, as a candidate in an election, I'm very careful not to be loose with the truth. And that means if I want to make a statement that says that all the other candidates have never been involved in small business, I'd find that information out first. Or if I say, oh, this political party has never supported light rail, I would actually look up their policy on the internet, and the Greens policy on the internet says light rail. So I think integrity comes from being, a person who has ethics and morals. And I don't think that's something that you can, grab just because you're suddenly a candidate. It's something that the community has to understand, and you have to have that empathy with the community, and so the community knows that you do have the integrity that's needed for the job.
Thank you, Michael. Tim, you grabbed the microphone. Go for it.
Get back. Get at this screen. Look, I've always valued integrity, and on a day-to-day basis, that's just what I do in my job, and I've always done that. I've come from a very grassroots position in terms of politics. I've come through the community. I've worked as the chairman, for example, of the Throsby Community Forum with Lynn Kilby here for 3.5 years. If Lynn and the Throsby community don't know me well, then I don't know who does. But I've spent my whole life working for the community ever since spending a year in South Africa when I was 17 and seeing the massive inequality and injustices of apartheid, and going into schools and seeing all the windows smashed out with guys with submachine guns holding the school to make sure nothing happens with all the kids in that. I made a vow to myself when I was travelling and over in South Africa that I would always fight for equality and justice and fight for my community. And that's what I've done ever since. And I've worked overseas in environmental education. I've worked for community forums. I've become a councillor on Newcastle City Council, and my record there for over 6 years stands. And, I have the integrity and I'm getting the trust of the community, and that's what I present. Thank you.
Karen, the question was, what will you do to restore the confidence?
Thanks. Well, before we start getting all warm and fuzzy, let's just think back to the recent council motion supported by both of my opponents up here to increase rates by nearly 50%, which was in stark disagreement with community consultation. On light rail, Michael, I'm very happy to sit down any time when you want to share with me your light rail plans for Newcastle. That would be fantastic. Look, I'm not a career politician. I haven't come through the party owing people favours or doing deals with anybody to get anywhere. Like everybody, including the Premier of our state, I was extremely angry and disappointed with what happened last year. In fact, it's not only the last year. The revelations that have come out through the ICAC of what has gone on over previous years is equally sickening. I stand by my track record as a business owner and a community person in Newcastle. At the end of the day, I think that people are pretty clever. I think they'll make up their own minds as to who they think is going to be able to represent them the best. I have I have one actually vested interest in Newcastle, and he's 9 years old, and I want to ensure that the legacy that we leave our children and our future generations from once in generation investment in our city hits the mark. And it's got to hit the mark by the leaders that put it into place, and it's also got to be the community that come with us and tell us what's needed and work together, instead of when something doesn't go our way, we retreat to a corner and nothing ever is resolved. So talking about transparency, I think it's been lacking all the way round, frankly. I think it's time to draw a line in the sand, and we need to go forward with a leader who is not climbing the ladder of any political party, working their way through the ranks. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Well, we might actually stick with you for this one. We kind of touched a little bit on this earlier when we were talking about ensuring that other areas are not forgotten, particularly when it comes to transport. But the question here that has been posed is the Baird government allocated $6 billion to the development of regional infrastructure. How will you ensure those funds allocated to our region won't be concentrated again on the East End, that other areas such as Hamilton, New Lambton and Mayfield are considered?
Yeah, absolutely right, Tanya. From the day I started my business in Newcastle, I got involved with the Chamber family, and from that day I learnt about the words connectivity, truncation, and it was all about that wretched rail line. When we were down in Beaumont Street on the weekend, I had two ends of the spectrum come and talk to me about that particular issue. One was a 21-year-old girl who was thrilled to see that things were happening, that we were going forward and there was a positive plan on the table. The other person was a 78-year-old resident of Hamilton who shared her views. So let's again draw that line in the sand. We've got once in a generation opportunity on the table. We've got a plan on the table which I haven't seen from anyone else that's workable, costed and able to be implemented. Our surrounding communities worry me. I think they do get left out, and I think they get left out all too often. Consult, consult, consult. And it's one of the reasons why it's so important that we have a member in this seat that is within government, that can speak on our behalf, and that you as a community can hold their feet to the fire when you think that a decision's been made that's wrong, or when something's not going the way that it needs to go for the best interests of your community. You've got someone with some influence that you can go to. Thank you.
Tim?
Yeah, look, the question is the Baird government's allocating $6 billion to development of regional infrastructure. Well, I reject that premise because, first of all, the Premier's got to sell off the poles and wires, right? We've got a hostile upper house. Lease. Oh, just like we've leased the port. That's right. We will be dead in 100 years when we get our port back. That's right. We'll all be dead. So the lease comes sale of the poles and wires that's the premise. So we've got a hostile upper house. We've got Fred Niles saying that he's not going to do that unless there are quite a few guarantees. You've got an election coming up that will swing this upper house more to the left than to the right. So I think the whole premise of Mike Baird's infrastructure spend is severely flawed. So as Luke Foley said, what is Plan B? What is Plan B? There isn't a Plan B. But I can tell you we have a plan, and that's to spend $810 million on infrastructure. There is a $10 billion budget for infrastructure in New South Wales. I'm answering
We'll take
the question.
questions from the floor after the candidates
The
are
question
finished.
is, where do you get the money from? The answer is every year we spend $10 billion on infrastructure in New South Wales. This government is intending to lease poles and wires to get a whole lot more. Now, we can still spend money on infrastructure through not selling those poles and wires, leasing the poles and wires. And in fact, you get $1.5 billion every year from the poles and wires that you put into schools, teachers, nurses, hospitals, roads, rail, all that infrastructure. Where will the government get the money from once they've sold it or leased it? You tell me. You answer that question. So I think this is a bit of a joke. In fact, we have committed and we have the funding and we have to present our financials to the independent government costing analyst, and we will fix Adamstown gates. Fully costed, funded, overpass, underpass. We'll do the Newcastle inner city bypass. Yes, we will do that. I don't know why it was just said that we won't do that. We'll do the Toole Street Bridge duplication. We'll also do the Glendale Transport interchange, something this government is not interested in doing. Now, all those projects aren't in the CBD of Newcastle. They're spreading it right round, and certainly going to the second part of the questions on concentrating money on Newcastle East, well, I'll give you an example of our commitments that are certainly not in Newcastle East. So that's my answer.
Thank you, Tim. Michael?
Thanks, Tanya. I think one of the important things in going into an election is that you not only hear from candidates and what their ideas are or what their promises are, but actually have it almost a guarantee that that's what they'll do if they get in. Now, in the Greens, we always develop our policies in the lead up to an election, publish them on the website. Anyone can look on the website and have a look and see exactly what the detail is. Under the regional development policy, it's quite explicit, and it actually goes to what I think is the nub of this question. So I know that there's a view that this $6 billion is not real because it's all contingent on something happening, which many political pundits say is not going to happen. And what the nub of the question, in my view, is how do we as a community get our fair share? And I think whether it's Labor or Liberal, I believe Newcastle and the Hunter has really missed out on infrastructure spending and on service spending from the state government. For many years on council, we've been pushing for a levy on the coal going through our port to come to the Lower Hunter to offset some of the impact from that, but to use for investment and services in the Hunter. So can I be quite clear on what the Greens policy on regional development says? There's a whole range of points. Number 27 says regional development bodies must have representative and democratic control. What that means is that the Hunter Regional Development Authority should have our involvement in those decisions. So that's not a board that the state government appoints, whether it's Labor or Liberal, and that they work behind the scenes and come up with a list which they then advocate for, but a democratic and representative system so that we all get a say in what are those projects. What are the economic projects that will drive the economic opportunities for business in the future? Fix the problems of the past. Toole Street Bridge and Cormorant Road is something that I took to Newcastle Council to get their support for, and that was unanimous support many years ago, and when the Labor Party was in state government. There are obvious economic investments that should be made in the Lower Hunter, but we need to have that conversation. So we've got a consensus around what are those economic investments that need to be made in the Lower Hunter. The decision shouldn't be made behind closed doors and shouldn't be made in Sydney. It should be made in the Hunter.
Thank you, Michael. Tim, we'll start with you for the next one. With the growing importance of tourism in the region, how will you ensure that the local industry is given the assistance it needs to remain competitive?
Thanks, Tanya. Look, our big policy is for tourism, and to improve that is to build a convention centre in Newcastle. Now, we know this is something the Hunter Business Chamber's been talking about and doing their own research on. And I had a meeting not so long ago getting key stakeholders from the university, the Hunter Business Chamber, and other levels of government together to discuss this particular issue. Because we've got 5 convention centres in the east coast of Queensland. We've got a big one in Sydney, and we're the second largest city in this state, and we don't even have a convention centre. So I think that is something that this city really does need, and will draw a huge amount of people here and a great big tourism benefit as well. We also have a policy of local jobs first within the Labor Party, which puts a local weighting on tenders for big projects. That certainly applies to all sectors of the economy. And you've got to look for those great opportunities like the Asian Cup. Now, the Labor government put an enormous amount of money federally, $30 million into that, and also contributed to the state. And that was a Labor $60 million investment into the Hunter Stadium, and it's now reaping those rewards. So your government's got to be big enough and bold enough and courageous enough to make those big investments to see the future paying off, as we did and are doing, as we did with the law courts, moving them to the new precinct as well. So it's the Asian Cup bringing those huge benefits to Newcastle and having us shown right around the world. And it's also, you know, I've said before, we should be going for the 2030 Commonwealth Games. We brought that up in council over a year ago. So they're the big projects that, you know, we should look at. The big vision, get people here and get tourism booming. And just last Sunday, you know, the great festival that this chamber organised is also another thing on a smaller scale. It really does draw people to the region. So it's not just about the big ones, it's also about business chambers doing a great job as well. Thanks.
Thanks,
very much.
Tim. Michael?
Tanya.
Thanks, Tanya. So the Greens policy recognises that tourism is an important contributor to our economy. For anyone who has visited Queensland or Victoria, they know that the tourist infrastructure there is worlds ahead of what it is in New South Wales. When you go to Melbourne or to Brisbane, you can find a tourist information centre. You can get all the detail of what you want to see. You can, you know, book right there, and you can get around the city easily. In Newcastle, we're sadly lacking that sort of infrastructure. And so it's one of the Greens policy points that we establish an identified fund under Infrastructure New South Wales to provide councils with the funding opportunity to support tourism infrastructure. The decisions on the tourism infrastructure of where it should be and what it should be made locally by the council, but the funding should come from the state government. But it should also come from the federal government, and one of our points is to ensure that the financial assistance grants from the Commonwealth Government are reviewed to take into account the tourism opportunities in the economy. And Newcastle is a tourist destination. We at one stage were in the top 10 places to visit in Lonely Planet. We've slipped out of that. We've slipped out of it because there hasn't been that investment in the infrastructure, I believe.
Thank you, Michael. Karen?
Thank you, Tanya. Tim, just regarding your convention centre, what's the costing on that? What are the funds that you'll need to get it up?
No.
Well, I just, you know,
You don't have to
there is a
answer?
lot of looseness with the truth going on up
What I've
here.
got is a plan right here that I can provide for you if you'd like to
What's the
take
costing?
this home. Have you had a look?
What's the costing? Okay.
We will provide the land, and we will also provide an initial amount of money to get that moving and look for public-private partnerships. But
Okay.
can I ask
No.
questions now, Tanya?
Well,
Are we ready to
we might just
start
stick
asking
with...
about the Baird government's record on...
we could be here all night if you ask each other questions.
On the rail line here and also on investments.
Let's
Karen,
go
we
back
might-
to the fun things that are tourism.
We might just
So
ask...
yes, here is the plan for the convention centre, and you've all got one there. So
All right. So
I've
you can
handed
read
them out
that at
if
your
you'd like to
leisure.
have a look.
Karen, time's
There we
on.
go, Karen.
How
So
will we
in
remain
terms of
competitive?
tourism, we have $300 million on the table from Rebuilding New South Wales that will go into a regional tourism fund, the likes of which haven't been seen before. And Newcastle will step up to the plate and they will receive that share of funding. We've also, most importantly, and this is a really, it's a very polarising issue for our city, but to see people walk across seamlessly from the CBD to the foreshore shouldn't be underestimated. That investment is linked also to tourism as well as revitalising our city. And we are going to see investment pour into Newcastle, and that creates opportunity for tourism operators. We need more hotels in the city, and we need better tourism connectivities, particularly, again, as I say, out to our airport.
All right. Okay. We might start with you, Michael. What is being done to bring manufacturers to the Hunter that are not mining related?
A great question. And one thing that isn't being done is that there isn't a plan for it to happen. And if there's not a plan for it to happen, then it won't happen, or it'll happen by chance. And I say to you that it won't happen. And the way for it to happen is for the state and federal government to make the commitment. And the commitment means that we will build the trains that we need, light rail and heavy rail, here in the Hunter. That we will build the ships we need right here in the Hunter. And that will only happen if the state and federal government make a plan for it. And that means, for example, getting down to when a tender assessment and giving a weighting for local content. Now, one thing the federal government has done, and that's the Liberal federal government, They have signed an agreement, an international agreement, which makes it harder for that provision to be put into tender assessments because they've opened the globalisation of the economy, but they've signed an agreement with other countries that allows their companies from those countries to sue the Australian government if they do that. So we need commitment from the state and federal governments. I give you my commitment, if you elect me as your representative on March 28, that I'll advocate. I'm passionate about diversifying our economy, which includes improving our manufacturing sector. Our manufacturing sector is sliding away, and politicians of both persuasions are letting it happen.
Thank you, Michael. Karen?
Thank you very much. Well, since 2011, there's been 125,000 new jobs created. Nowhere near enough, and we are feeling the pinch across more than just manufacturing, actually. It's right across the service sector. As I mentioned earlier, the other week I spoke at a UDIA event where we were talking about development and investment and what's happening in our region. There's the Williamtown Aerospace Centre, which is out near the airport at Williamtown, which is now employing hundreds and hundreds of people in defence and IT, not even related, not even close to servicing the Joint Strike Fighter contract. These are just overseas businesses that have come in and set up. And do you want to know the reason why they've done that? They've done it because government have invested in the sewer and the water infrastructure that they needed. It's 25% occupied at the moment, and there are easily 250 people working there. We have got to diversify what our offering is, both nationally and internationally, to business, and really government's role is to step up and fund that infrastructure. I know that HunterNet and the Chamber are doing a lot of work around manufacturing infrastructure. The issue of waiting for local content is a highly polarising issue, but I really think that when it comes to creating diverse economies, there is no right or wrong answer. This is a time when all stakeholders need to come to the table and they need to bring their problems and their ideas to the table, and we have to work together on it, or there won't be any jobs for our kids. Thank you.
Okay, Karen. Tim?
Yeah, look, what has not been done to bring manufacturers to Hunter? That's probably more the question. For people who go past Tomago, they might have seen that amazing, huge, new warehouse out there that was our Volgren bus manufacturing company, state-of-the-art. Well, who got New South Wales bus contracts? A Queensland company. And what happened to our bus manufacturing company here in Newcastle? It had to close down. Where did the patrol boat contracts go? To Spain. Where have our train contracts going to go? Where are they going when we've got 2 train manufacturers here? China. So for all the talk of manufacturing locally, this government spends billions and billions of dollars on manufacturing contracts, and what have we got here? Zip. Forjacs are going to lay off more workers. So what Labor's proposing is a 20% price preference for local contractors and service providers that do demonstrate local content, plus another 5% for targeted economic development regions such as the Hunter. So yeah, we do have a real policy to get that manufacturing here in Newcastle and the Hunter, because we see it as a real problem. There's a lot of boasting about the economy. Well, unemployment's doubled here. It's gone from 4 to 8% in the last 12 months. That's not a great economy here in the Hunter, and that's going to get worse. So there's a lot of talk, there's not much action, and certainly our plan is also to make Newcastle and the Hunter a renewable energy hub, and we've got a policy right here on that. We can't rely on coal forever, and we've got fantastic CSIRO here in Newcastle. We've got the university out there that's creating solar paint at the moment. We've got the Institute of Resources and Energy. And our commitment is to put $10 million into that, straight up front. $10 million to build capacity to lead this country in energy storage. Not only that, we'll provide $2 million for a Hunter Clean Tech Innovation Task Force. Another fact, that's what we will do. And we'll also provide $2 million to TAFE to train people locally in this, renewable energy. So there you go. You've got concrete commitments from me on manufacturing and new energy in Newcastle and the Hunter.
Thank you, Tim. All right, that ends the prepared questions. I've been told we need to go to the floor now, so we might grab a microphone. If someone can come up and grab a mic. You've got one there? Okay, the lady down the front here. We'll start with you. We'll just get you the mic.
My name's Lynn Kilby. I live in Wickham and I've been part of the community all across the Throsby Basin intensively for many, many years. I've been very close to Jodie McKay and Tim Owen because they've both been our MPs. I admire the three of you to take this role on and sit amongst our own peers and at times be treated well and other times treated very, very badly. So I'd like to firstly thank you. But it's when you go to Sydney. Now, Tim Owen came into the job with integrity.
Hang on.
And participated.
Sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt
One more
you.
question.
We just need a question
and the
for
question
one of
will
the
be,
candidates.
number two, Jodie McKay was told by Roosendahl to fuck off and shut the door on. Now, what will
Can
you
we
do?
get a question
yes,
from
we're
you?
getting it now.
Okay.
What will you do in Sydney with the big A attitude in Sydney when you go there as people as you are with your integrity, your vision, and the fact that the city has been neglected and so has the Throsby Basin? How will you deal with the attitude? Thank you.
Okay, this is open slather, so
Yeah,
jump in.
Look, we've got a great Labor team here in the Hunter. We've got Sonia Hornery, who is the Shadow Minister for the Hunter, and she has fought for Newcastle and the Hunter non-stop her whole period in Parliament. Now, with Sonia leading our team, we hope to get a good team into Parliament, and we will put it to Sydney that this area needs to be represented. Hopefully we will have a good lot of MPs to take to Sydney, and we will have that strength. So certainly that's my plan, is to be part of a good, strong team and say to Sydney, hey, hold on, what about us? We deserve our fair share. We deliver $1.5 billion every year in state government royalties through in this region, and we deserve a greater share of that. So that's what I'd be saying.
Okay. Who else? You are being the gentleman, Karen. Go ahead. It's all so nice up here.
Well, I mean, I don't know about that. I'm used to working in Sydney. I've been a board member on the board of the New South Wales. Yeah, no, okay, I'm demonstrating track record. I've worked on the board of the New South Wales Business Chamber for many years through various iterations of negotiations for licence agreements between that organisation and the Hunter Business Chamber. I don't think you get anywhere wandering down hallways and pounding on doors. My grandmother had this saying, which I thought was very daggy at the time, and it probably still is. It's all about bees and honey and vinegar. If you want someone to treat you well, you have to treat them well. And when you go to the table to negotiate on something, be very clear about all of your positions. What is it that you want to achieve? Who do you want to achieve it for? And where your boundaries are. And I believe that our Premier has integrity in spades of the highest order, and it's recognised almost on a daily basis around the country. His integrity is intrinsically linked to the reason why I am seeking to be the Liberal member for Newcastle. And to date, my experiences with hopefully my future colleagues have been extremely respectful. We have been treated very well by ministers that have not been treated particularly well when they visited our city. And further to your point, Lynn, of integrity, I think we've let ourselves down on many occasions, and it's every leader's role to set the integrity standard and adhere to it themselves. Now, look, people screw up, and that's essentially what has occurred. No political party sits in a glass house, and it's all down to the people. I'm new to the Liberal Party, it's no secret. I sit here as the candidate because I believe in two things. I believe in Newcastle and that we deserve a strong voice within government, and I believe that Mike Baird is committed to the promises that he has made based on his current track record to our region, and I want to hold him accountable for even more. Thank you.
Okay, Michael.
Thank you, and thanks for the question. It's a very good question, actually. And I guess I need to explain how the Greens do things differently. In New South Wales, we don't have a leader. Both the old parties, there's a white male is the leader. And when decisions are made, it usually comes from the leader's office. In the Greens, we do things collaboratively. So we get together and we work out what's the best approach for New South Wales. And that's where, we come up with all these policy points. And you'll see scattered throughout those policies things to do with Newcastle, because I've gone to those meetings and I've argued our case to get policy points put in there. So when we do things collaboratively. What that means, though, in Parliament, and a good example actually is the recent Newcastle inquiry, which was a Greens initiative, and it was brought about by negotiating with the other players in Parliament. And as an example, on Newcastle Council, there's been many occasions when I've negotiated with the other councillors to try and get a Newcastle Council consensus position. And a good example would be the cycling strategy, which came about from a notice of motion I wrote, but I negotiated with someone from the Labor Party, someone from the Independents. We talked about it, we got it right, we took it to council, it was unanimously supported. Part of that was to get a working party together to work with everyone in the community and develop up that strategy collaboratively. That came back to council and was put on exhibition unanimously, came off exhibition, was tweaked based on the submissions from the community, and was then adopted unanimously, and council allocated funds to implement it. And that's an example of where, when you work with all the different players across the spectrum, you can get really good outcomes.
Okay. Another question. Lady there.
Hello, thank you everyone for such great information tonight. Now I'm going to show my extreme ignorance here. Preference votes. Oh, somebody asked me about them the other day. So can somebody just explain, just one person, if you vote, so Michael, if I voted for you, where do the preference votes for you go?
Thanks for the question. I do hope you vote for me. In New South Wales at the state government election, preferences depend on what you write on the piece of paper.
Okay.
And that's the system we should have across this country, and that's why the Greens in the federal parliament have been pushing to reform the federal system, which is about preference deals behind closed doors. But in New South Wales at our state election, the numbers you put on the piece of paper are your preferences, and they're the ones that matter. Okay. But you should put number 1 next to the Greens.
Yeah. But if somebody doesn't understand that and they just put number 1, say for Tim or for Karen or for you, and they don't fill out the rest of the numbers, how does it work from there?
The vote dies after it's counted.
So it's not, so like the preference doesn't go to a Liberal or Labor person, there's no preference vote.
It's actually a wasted vote, because what you really want to say is that if this person who I really want doesn't get in, the next best person is this person. And so on until down to the person who you don't really want to get in.
So if it's neck and neck and you're sort of, so I'm saying Greens here because I just want to understand that system. So if you don't get in, then your preference votes don't go to anyone. You don't allocate them to anybody else?
I don't allocate them, but each individual voter may have allocated them, and that's when the votes move.
Right, thank you, I understand that. Can I ask one more question?
It's optional preferential.
Optional?
Optional preferential, which means you have the option of just doing one. Or you can do all of them, as many as you like. So
you're better off actually, to make your vote, do every number. Powerful. All right, thank you. Other question. The Toole Street Bridge, who the hell took it down and why? And I don't understand that. And then we should be grateful it's going back up again because you ripped it down and it was our money and it's going to be our money to put it back up. Should we bow down and kiss everybody for that?
No, we shouldn't. It was a disaster. Sorry. Jodie McKay is a very dear friend of mine, and she fought tooth and nail to replace a 2-lane bridge with a 4-lane bridge. It didn't happen, so we got a 2-lane bridge.
Decision
now
in
it's
Sydney.
not good enough. Yeah, look, you're probably right.
I agree.
Yeah, look, it was a bad decision.
I think we're all in
But going a little bit further.
Can I just get a picture of this for social media?
Holy dooly.
I'm in shock.
Look at that.
We also actually agree on a regional transport something. I'm just concerned about the bureaucracy that Michael's going to crazily go around and and create, but the concept is good. So when you're talking about the Till Street Bridge, what's happening now is there is matched money from the federal government and the state government. So it's actually $50 million each to put another 2 lanes on the bridge, so it becomes a 4-lane bridge, which is a bit crazy when you consider you're going to come off 2 lanes into 1 lane all the way along Cormorant Road. So we're also extending Cormorant Road up to that roundabout where you go around and then up over Stockton Bridge. Technical term.
Anyone want to add anything there?
Sorry, I've been in small business for 35 years, and so help me God, what a waste of money that is. And if we'd have been operating our business like that, we'd have been dead long ago.
Claire,
I'm sorry, Karen, it's just so bloody frustrating
well,
that
it
we
was
see
silly,
governments throw away money.
And it was one of those situations. I was the Hunter business president at the time, and it was one of those moments where you just scratch your head and say, I think the costings at the time were another $15 million would have got us those 2 extra lanes. Now, it wouldn't have got Cormorant Road, given, but we're now having to spend $100 million to fix it up. It's a shocker.
It was a crazy financial decision at the time, and certainly wasn't an economic decision, because the economics said put in 4 lanes because that's an important economic infrastructure, that section there. Quite apart from the issue with Stockton residents who need that connection in case of emergency. And there's several types of emergency where Stockton needs the connection across Kooragang.
Okay, I'm getting... Is it one more question we can take? One more question? Okay, someone down... Did you have a question? Okay. Is this the final question, Nathan?
This is for Tim. With many well-renowned economists writing and stating residents of 2 Labor states, that is Victoria and South Australia, have cheaper and more efficient power costs per household, between 2008 and 2014, electricity transmission and distribution costs increased by some $400 per household in Queensland and New South Wales, where poles and wires are government-owned, but by around $250 per household only in privatised systems in Victoria and South Australia. The Premier states that leasing the electricity networks represents a chance to finally fund the road, rail, education and health projects that were badly needed. New South Wales was so far behind that it needed the turbocharger of privatisation. Question is, why is Labor using a scare campaign stating power costs will increase if the plan to lease 49% of poles and wires in New South Wales goes ahead?
Thanks. Look, it's a fact that South Australia's privatised their power distribution, and it's a fact that it's owned by a Chinese individual, and it's a fact that they get $400 every year from every individual in the state into his pocket. That is a fact. The fact is, poles and wires in New South Wales bring in $1.5 billion every year that we spend on roads, hospitals, nurses, teachers and other infrastructure. Once you sell the goose that lays the golden egg, just like our port, it's gone. So let me answer the question. How will you fund? How will this bad government fund our schools, our hospitals, our nurses, our roads in the future if the main income producing asset of the state is gone? You can have a one-off bonanza sale, like the sale, that's a question to me, excuse me. You can have a one-off bonanza, just as we've done with the port, 1.75 billion, and this government's giving us very little of that. And a lot of that money, if you look up the budget papers, is going to roads on the North Shore and roads in the western suburbs of Sydney. It's not coming to Newcastle. And the amount of money we're going to get out of that proposed sale is very small. Now, we have a plan that keeps that $1.5 billion coming in to the coffers every single year, to spend on our teachers, our nurses, our schools. That's our plan. And don't forget, there is no plan B. If it doesn't get through the upper house, the whole election promise of the Baird government, the sweetener, doesn't exist. Where is Plan B? It was asked of me that question.
I've got to say it was. I have to pull it up there because I'm getting the wind up. Okay, you know what? 30 seconds each to sum up, and that's not very long. Trust me, it's about 250 words. I write them. So 30 seconds each, and I'm going to be brutal. So let's go. Karen, 30 seconds. Microphone.
Hello? If you look at the facts, the dividends now from our electricity distribution are declining to $400 million a year. They are nowhere near $1.5 billion, and that is publicly available information in the half-yearly budget review. And to be honest, whilst they're from the other side, I don't mind Bob Carr, Michael Costa, Martin Ferguson, Maurice Yemmer, Paul Keatings and the Productivity Commission report on electricity network regulation, which says it is the right thing to do.
That's it. Thank you, Karen. Well done. 31 seconds. Michael, 30 seconds.
I hope this election you vote for someone you can trust, someone who has integrity, and someone who will represent the interests of Newcastle, not be told what to do by their Sydney leader.
Thank you. And Tim, a final 30.
My vision for Newcastle is for a vibrant, healthy, smart Newcastle with full employment that nurtures the creativity for which we are known.
Ladies and gentlemen, please thank our three candidates for the City of Newcastle, Ms Karen Howard, Mr Tim Crakanthorp and Mr Michael Osborne. And thank you for coming this evening. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.